anime just isn't the same anymore. Even after leaving the golden age of anime, we were still greeted with some pretty great shows in the earlier 2010s. But as time progressed, those became more and more scarce. And now, well, they're practically obsolete, to a point where there are barely any memorable shows from each season. I mean, come on, name me at least 3 half-decent and somewhat memorable shows from last season. You can't. It feels like every season we just keep on receiving more and more mundane garbage we'll either drop or just plain forget after a short period of time. But even with anime seasons featuring big names such as Kyoto Annie, A1 Pictures, Production IG, and even Trigger, I can just barely mention 5 solid anime that I could say I would recommend that have released this year alone. But this doesn't necessarily mean certain genres aren't getting their attention, because let me tell you, certain genres, emphasis on certain, are definitely getting their exposure. Can someone please tell me why isekai is still a thing? And it's sad because one of my personal favorite genres has been swept aside now and is just that one-off show that could be either a gem or a complete miss. And more often than not, it's usually a miss. And for me, that genre are the romantic comedies, or rom-coms if you will. Now, before I discuss these, I'd like to bring light to something I've noticed that has become increasingly apparent over the past few years especially. And that is what distinguishes a romantic comedy from your standard run-of-the-mill trashy high school show. We've become so exposed to overused slice-of-life anime and the tropes within them that we actually begin to forget what it means to be a romantic comedy in the first place. For instance, Your Lie in April is a great slice-of-life anime that incorporates music and places it on this standard drama-ridden template of a show. Now, although this show is technically a romance, just because it has dashes and hints of comedy every now and then does not mean this should be considered a romantic comedy in any regard. But instead of discussing random anime from different time periods, let's break this video down into small bite-sized pieces and overview the progression of romantic comedies from 3 different eras, those being the 2000s, the early 2010s, and the modern era of romantic comedies. A significant portion of the anime community would consider the 2000s, and specifically the mid to late 2000s, as the golden age for anime, featuring amazing shows such as Gurren Lagann and Code Geass, just to name a few. In addition, this was around the same time that slice-of-life shows, specifically those involving a high school setting, were becoming increasingly popular and giving us icons such as Clannad and Haruhi Suzumiya. But one show in particular truly set the bar for what a slice-of-life show should be, and specifically a romantic comedy, and that is of course the infamous Toradora. If for whatever reason you're unfamiliar with Toradora, it was a slice-of-life romantic comedy airing in the late 2000s that accelerated in popularity thanks to a fresh new trope that it brought to the scene, that being the tsundere trope. Now, this show wasn't just known for its tropes. Rather, it was also an icon in the slice-of-life genre, seeing that it was a quality show for its time and still holds up to this day. It incorporates some fantastic character development and dynamics, and in general, it's not only just a good romantic comedy, it enlightened and inspired other works following the same genre. And as I said, it set the bar for what a romantic comedy should be, and caused a surge of similar shows that were birthed in the early 2010s as a direct result. Now, before we move on to the growth of romantic comedies in the early 2010s, I'd like to quickly address something. This follows on from the point I made about Your Lie in April, in that even though a show may incorporate comedic elements and blend them with romance, it doesn't necessarily make it a romantic comedy. And this is highlighted in another show in the mid to late 2000s, that being Haruhi Suzumiya. Many fans online repeatedly claim that Haruhi is technically a romance, therefore making it a romantic comedy since it is a comedy-driven series. This, however, is not correct. Haruhi features no explicit romance in any regard, and although romance is implied and it has some well-built romantic drama, it is by no means a romantic comedy. The textbook definition for a romantic comedy is a film or play that deals with love in a light, humorous way. And Haruhi, although very comedic, doesn't deal with concepts of love barely at all. So even though my anime list has marked the disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya as a romance, this is in reference to the romantic drama and implications, and not the love shared amongst two characters. That was a mouthful. Following the huge success of Toradora, many shows attempted to replicate that success by incorporating some similar tropes to their own anime and add their own spin on this fresh and popular new genre. Some proving successful and others not. Yet there were a few shows who adopted some minor traits from Toradora but took an absolutely new take to the genre. A prime example being Origairu and The Pet Girl of Sakura So. Origairu experienced mass popularity seeing that it both recognized and met the level of quality displayed by Toradora, but featured a more relatable cast with a lot more comedic influence. Our protagonist, Hachiman Hikigaya, is extremely relatable to many, and his witty humor and behavioral traits make him both memorable and engaging to watch. In addition, the general direction of the show and its writing is top-notch, establishing a realistic love triangle amongst the two main female leads, which is so good that 7 years on, during the airing of its final season as we speak, fans are still puzzled as to who will turn out victorious. And that is the brilliance of a romantic drama done correctly. In addition, The Pet Girl of Sakura So is another genius take on romantic comedies. The character dynamics and developments are done so well and written so perfectly that this show still leaves a lasting impression on fans 8 years on. Sakura So excels in its well-timed comedy and genuinely engaging love triangle and romantic drama surrounding the main cast. It's gotten to a point where in both of these shows, but specifically Sakura So, the viewer is left conflicted and genuinely concerned as for the result of this romance trifecta. How Sakura So differs from Origairu, however, is that it follows the path of Toradora even more so. And this is emphasized in the fact that it is touchingly tragic and brings you on this emotional journey only to provide a perfectly bittersweet conclusion that has literally given many that rare feeling of post-anime depression. Anime like these don't appear often anymore, and it's a real shame because both these shows were very well received, even if Sakura So did not receive as much attention as it deserved. And with that being said, it brings us into our final section, the modern era of romantic comedies. And here we are, in the year 2020, the modern era and the breeding ground for the 6 out of 10 isekai shows, painfully average slice of lives, and an occasional good shonen or two from time to time. We're currently in a period where romantic comedies are far from commonplace and are actually a dying art form. The introduction of Kaguya-sama Love is War during 2019 is perhaps the only single defining show that will carry the rom-com scene for as long as it can really, seeing that Origairu is finally getting its conclusion in a few months as of the time of this recording. So, what happens next? Well, no one really knows. Bunny Girl Senpai is practically on its last legs, seeing that there is barely any content in the light novels to adapt, and as far as I'm concerned, there isn't a fresh new contender for Kaguya, meaning the rom-com scene may very well be dead within a few years. What caused this, you might ask? Well, it's very possible that studios found it less favourable to animate a rom-com as opposed to an isekai, or other trending genres, as it will undoubtedly pull in money, but that's only speculation at best. So that pretty much covers it. Rom-coms are rapidly declining in both variety and abundance, as well as popularity. Now, it's not impossible that newer rom-coms could enter the scene at any given moment and make a fundamental change, but looking at our current trend at this instance, it appears that the rom-com scene is now a dead topic. But what does this mean for anime in general? Sadly not much. Most of the community is perfectly content with an abundance of mundane and repetitive content that will be forgotten in a matter of weeks. This isn't to say that there haven't been any memorable shows in recent times, because shows like The Promised Neverland, Beastars and Vinland Saga all released as of last year and will hardly be forgotten. It's just apparent that 2020 has been a very stale year for hot shows, and now with the rom-com scene practically dead, who knows what's next? I think we all know what's coming next. No, seriously, why is this guy still this popular? Like, please, someone give me a logical answer. I apologize for that. This was an essay on the dying art of romantic comedies. If you have any suggestions for ideas or just want to lend me some feedback, that would be greatly appreciated, and please do so in the comments below. And so once again, this will conclude yet another video essay.